Okay, welcome to the My Support Calculator. Today, what we're going to cover is who the calculator is for and how to use the calculator. So the calculator is for people who have an NDIS plan. So whether that's you as the participant, whether it's a family member trying to work out how much support that you can afford, or whether you're a support coordinator assisting a participant to work out how much support they can afford as well. I'm Aaron, I'm from Marco Polo, and we're a housemate matching platform. We built this calculator as an example of how it works in terms of funding of supports and sharing support. We've seen a lot of changes recently, and sharing support is going to become far more normal. So we've built this calculator as not a replacement for a roster of care, but it is a really easy example to work out what kind of ratios you can use in terms of support to make sure that you stay under budget. So the first thing you'll see here in the calculator is we've got a shared housing cost calculator, but it does actually incorporate community access as well. Before you start, we do have to let you know that this is an estimate only. If you get a quote back from a SIL provider or a community access provider, it may be a little bit different, especially in SIL, because this calculator doesn't cover things like dedicated one-on-one time. It doesn't cover a whole bunch of holiday fluctuations either. And it doesn't cover things like minimum shift lengths and things that providers have to stick to under the SHADS award. That's a whole bunch of nonsense to you, don't worry about it, but this will give you a good idea of what ratio of support you can actually afford under your plan. So the first section here is your NDIS plan budget. Now, to find your NDIS plan budget, this is actually a lot harder than I expected because I found a couple of example plans and it does not make a whole lot of sense. The plans have changed so much over the last couple of years, it is bloody confusing to figure out how much is actually in your plan for this support. But we're going to go through a couple of examples here. Okay, so we're going to look at the total core funding of this plan. In order for us to get the amount that we chuck into the calculator, you see your total funding amount here, and it's for 1 year. But we're looking at core supports, particularly home and living supports and community access supports. So best way to do this is we look at our total core funding. That includes a couple of other things as well we don't want to include in the calculation. But we look at our assistance with social, economic and community participation, which is the community line item in the calculator. So we're adding 85,000. And then what we look down for is our home and living funding. So we've got 261, which is incorporating your regular SIL supports for this person and 11,000-ish roughly of irregular. So it makes you work out how much is in your total budget for that year. Now, this plan is actually a little bit simpler than a couple of the other plan examples I'm going to show you. So let me show you this other one here, which is a new look plan example. This is also 1 year, but you can see the plan talks about your personal details and it gives you the total budget funding. Now this one doesn't actually have SIL inside of it, so it can be a little bit confusing to work out how much you've got. Again, this is a 1 year plan from 2024 to 2025, but you can see the total core supports funding here is 25,000. This person doesn't have SIL funding. Doesn't mean that you can't use the calculator. So assistance with daily life. In here, no ratios, etc., but it tells you there's 13,000 for assistance with daily life and that it's flexible. Then the second part is 12,500-ish for community access. So it would be those two numbers we add together to get the total amount of funding available. In this last example I'm going to show you, this is where it gets really confusing and planners, I don't know what they do sometimes, but let's have a quick look. Here we've got one, I've deleted it and anonymized this plan, but basically you go down into the funding portion of the plan. Keep going, keep going, keep going. We've got our goals. We've got our total funded supports. Now this is a 4-year plan. It's a lot more difficult to interact with. So under this one, the core supports are 1.1 million. Over 4 years. So you need to divide that total amount by 4 to work out the total amount of funding. The really fun part of this plan, it doesn't actually explain how much is in community access. We've just been told that there's 344,000 for supported independent living. And there's a few other little bits in here, but there's nothing that says how much community access actually is, which makes it a little bit difficult. You have to do a bit of extra math. But I'm hoping that those 3 examples have given you a decent idea on how to find that plan amount. So we're actually going to use the old plan numbers because that's actually far more simple to use for the calculator here. Okay, so we're now back to the calculator. And we've got the total annual budget. It's 347,448.2. Now, I'm just going to reiterate, this is just an example because this calculator is built on current pricing arrangements, 25-26, and this plan would have been built for the 24-25 cycle, which means that the rates would have been lower. But this is just a good example to play with because it is a relatively high budget for a year. So now when we look at the calculator itself, we've got the annual amount that we've plugged in. You can plug in the weekly amount if that's what it says in your plan. But we can now look at where you live. So we've got the loading based on where you live, whether you're in a standard. So like think about metro areas, Brisbane, Adelaide, Sydney, whatever. And then you'll have remote, which has an extra loading, and then a very remote. So we're going to leave it at standard for easiness sake. And we will now start working with the ratios in terms of the roster itself. So for this person, we're just going to start at 1-to-1 because it is easier to do. 1-to-1 for the sleepover and then 1-to-1 for community. Now I'm going to be super clear as well. Sleepover versus active overnights. If you've got sleepovers in your plan, it will usually say so. If not, assume a sleepover. Active overnight means that you have a worker that's working with you all through the night and it becomes a lot more expensive. I've just cleared out the roster so that we can start from a blank slate. But we've got our day supports and then we've got our active overnights, our sleepover and our community. Now you can't have active overnights and sleepovers together, so you pick one or the other. Now we're going to start with 1-to-1 and everything. We're going to do a sleepover because it's generally more common to make it a little bit easier. But we go down to our weekly roster underneath and we've got Monday. So we're going to add in some shifts. So here you can see a weekly roster. We've got Monday day support from 7 a.m. till 3 p.m. This is, when we talk about day support, this is for in-home support. So in order to change these times, people usually usually have a shift that starts at 6 if you're doing 24-hour support. I want to be super clear here, this isn't required to have a full 24-hour overlap. If you're wanting just to work out how much your supports are likely to cost without it being 24 hours and whether sharing just brings that cost down, you can use this calculator as well. But it is helpful for 24-hour support. So we're going to add this one here. If you click on the little clock, we can go to 6 a.m. and then we click away from that. And then let's just say from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. is when we get ready in the morning. So we're 9 a.m. That's that first shift and it'll tell you $211 at 1-to-1. Now we're going to add in our next shift because this person goes out on community access. So we go community, because they've overlapped, there'll be a bit of an error message. But what we do is we go from 9 a.m. through to 3 p.m, pretty long day out. And then what we'll do is we'll add in our afternoon period. So we go to day support again, click on the clock. We'll go from 3 p.m. through to 10 p.m. In case you haven't worked it out, we are going to do doing a 24-hour shift here. So we're going to add in another shift, and then we go our last day shift. We're going to go to sleepover. Sleepover starts at 10 p.m. and finishes at 6 a.m. All right, and you can see that that's all clear. There's no error messages there. If you do try and make the sleepover shift longer than 8 hours, it doesn't actually work. Sleepovers are typically 8 hours, and this is what a 24-hour roster looks like. Now, that seemed to be a lot. It took a little while to work out, but what you can do to make life a little bit easier with this calculator is you can just copy the days across the week. So we've got Monday here, we can copy that to Tuesday, fills out the information immediately. and then you can edit each one if things change a little bit. But what I'm going to do for completeness, for easiness sake today, is I'm just going to copy all of these shifts to all of the days so that we've got a full roster here. Now, what it will show you at the bottom here is tells you how much it costs per week and how much it costs per year. Now, with this one, you can see that it's over budget by $259,000 a year, so 74% over, and it gives you a full breakdown of each support type. So we can see with this budget, a 1-to-1 ratio in all of these things is just not going to work. So one of the things people like to do first, most community access is funded at 1-to-1. So we might try and look at our in-home supports first to see if we can drop that ratio and bring that funding down. Just dropping from 1-to-1 to 1-to-2 can make a big difference. So we were 250,000 over before. We come down here, we've just dropped 150,000. So we're still over budget here because it's 450,000 per year. But we're going to come back up here and we go, okay, well, I don't really want my person living with 1-to-3. So we'll see if 1-to-2 can still work. If you're 1-to-2 during the day, you're generally a 1-to-2 as a sleepover as well. So that's going to be our next point of call. All right, we're getting pretty close now. All right, so what can we do? We can drop our community to 1-to-2. And now we're completely under budget by about $50,000. If you are playing with this calculator and trying to work out what will work, I would strongly suggest that you do leave a little bit of a buffer as well, because this calculator doesn't actually include things like 1-to-1 time. So sometimes even if you've got a ratio, you might request 1-to-1 time for showering, for meal prep, etc. during the evening and during the morning as well. And if you've got the budget to do so, your SIL provider will add that into their roster of care. So let's just say that we're completely happy with this budget here. We've worked out at 1-to-2. Actually, let's play with it a little bit more. So let's just say, look, we're happy for people to live 1-to-3, but we really do want them to get out in the community by themselves. They shouldn't have to share time to go out and go to the doctor or grocery shop, etc. So we're going to drop it to 1-to-3, but we're going to leave the community at 1-to-1. If we drop down here, we are super close to that budget, but this is pretty well what this person is actually funded for under their plan. They're a 1-to-3 participant in home. They've got, we'll go 1-to-3 as a sleepover as well. And you can see that we're getting pretty close, but we're within budget. But their community access is 1-to-1, and they're covered for 24 hours of the day. Now, in order for you, so you might really like this calculator, you've kind of worked out how many hours you want your person to be supported for. So best thing that you can do here is to go print and save as a PDF. You'll generally get a pop down that looks like this. Save it as a PDF. Okay, so we now have the PDF. I've opened it on my computer. This is the cost calculator, tells you when it was generated, under what pricing arrangements, how much it's going to cost per year, your annual amount, your estimated annual cost, and how much it is within budget. Gives you all the ratios here and how much it's all going to cost. We've got your weekly roster on page 2, so the one that you've put out. This is also super helpful if you are trying to tell a SIL provider what support you require. If you can send them this document, they know what the hours look like underneath. And then if you've got any time or any budget for 1-to-1 in terms of showering, etc., or if you want some breaks on the weekends and things, this is a really good way to send the information to a SIL provider, because then they know exactly what to chuck into the roster of care. And a final thing I'll say from us here at Marco Polo, if you have worked out that you probably do need to share your home and living supports, if you've got some ratios here of 1-to-3 for your home and living, and for your sleepover, your active overnight, Marco Polo is probably one of the best ways that you can find housemates that your loved one or yourself can live with without having to compromise on life, basically. If you want to find people that you gel with rather than being told who you have to share with, Marco Polo is the place to do that. If you want to check it out, literally go to the bottom of the calculator, click sign up to find housemates, and we'll take you to our app, which will help you find the perfect housemate for you. Thanks.